Good morning. We are going to work on adding and subtracting rational expressions. This is TEKS 2A.7F. One of the main rules of adding and subtracting the rational expressions is to make sure that they have a common denominator. And if they don't have a common denominator, you need to figure out what a common denominator would be so that you can multiply to make it have the common denominator. In this case, we have an x minus 4. And we have a 7x minus 8. And there's no greatest common factor, so I can't factor anything out. So my greatest common factor is actually going to be both of these next to each other. So we look at our first fraction and we determined what part of my least common denominator is it missing. Well, my first fraction is missing a 7x minus 8. And if I multiply on the denominator, I also must multiply on the numerator. So I'm really multiplying it by 1 because 7x minus 8 divided by 7x minus 8 is a 1 value. What I'm doing is if I multiply by the bottom, by the numerator and denominator, then I'm going to have that least common denominator. Now the second fraction, I am missing an x minus 4. And if I multiply on the denominator, I need to multiply on the numerator. Okay. The next step is to distribute. Now the one thing I want you to notice though is what was the sign of this problem. This problem actually is a minus sign. I know it's hard to see there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this 2x to a negative 2x and then make it a plus sign. Okay, so I'm actually distributing a negative 2x. So when I distribute, I get 14x minus 16 minus 2x squared plus 8x. The next step is to combine like terms and to put it in order. So my negative 2x squared comes first. Now I combine 14x and 8x. That is 22x. And I bring over the negative 16. Now bring over your denominator. The next step is to look at that numerator and see if there is a greatest common factor. So we look at the negative 2, the positive 22, and the negative 16, and we look if there's a greatest common factor that I can factor out. Well, what goes into all of them? I can factor out a negative 2. So when I factor out a negative 2, I'm basically dividing every term by a negative 2. Now I have to look if anything on my numerator is factorable. So I look at factors of AC whose sum is B. And I actually don't find any, so this is going to be my final answer. Now, because we're going to get into solving soon, we've got to mention the holes in this problem. We got to mention where our domain restrictions are. So we come back to the original denominators. And the reason we look at the original is because sometimes in our final answer, one of your factors might cancel out because they divide to 1. So we don't always look here, but we do go back and look here. What numbers cannot be in my denominator? Well, x minus 4, where it equals 0, is a domain restriction. Now, where my second fraction equals 0, there is a domain restriction. So add 8 to both sides, divide by 7. So those are my restrictions. So when I put them in my answer, I'm actually going to say that x cannot equal to 4 and x cannot equal to positive 8 over 7. So this is the full answer we're going to be looking for. Okay. Problem number 2. Again, we look for least common denominator. Now there should be an x right here. Okay. So I see an x minus 1 and an x minus 8 on my denominator. So again, my least common denominator is just putting these two next to each other. We look at what my first fraction is missing. My first fraction is missing the x minus 8. And whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. My second fraction is missing x minus 1. The next step is to distribute. Make sure you distribute to everything in the parentheses, not just the first term. So on my first fraction, I have 4x minus 32. My second fraction, I have plus 3x squared minus 3x. I'm going to combine like terms in my numerator and put it in order. So I have 3x squared, and I have 4 minus 3x, so I have a positive 1x minus 32, all over x minus 1, x minus 8. Is my top factorable? No. So because my numerator is not factorable, that's my final answer. But now we got to go back and look for the wholes. Set each denominator equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0, x minus 8 equals 0. My answers are x cannot equal a positive 1 and x cannot equal a positive 8. Because if it was those values, remember we cannot divide by 0. Okay. Third question. Okay, I look at my denominators. I have 10x plus 4 and I have 2. Well, my first fraction actually, I can factor out a 2. So what's left? I have 5x plus 2. Now, what are my different terms on the bottom? My different terms are 2 times 5x plus 2. So that's going to be my least common denominator. Now, my first fraction actually has both of those, so I don't need to multiply by anything. It already has it. My second fraction already has the 2, but it's missing the 5x plus 2. So I'm multiplying it by 5x plus 2 over 5x plus 2. The next step is to distribute on my numerator. So I have plus 20x plus 8. Next step is to combine like terms and to put them in the correct order. So we have 20x plus x, we have 21x. 6 plus 8, we have 14. Is there anything that goes into 21 and 14? The answer is yes, I can actually factor out a 7. So I'm going to factor out a 7, I'm left with 3x plus 2 over 2 times 5x plus 2. Do any of these factors divide out? No, they do not. So that's going to be my factored when I combine them. So now again, last step, we're going to go back and look for the holes in my graph. Where are my domain restrictions? So I'm going to come back to the original ones. Now, the 2, I don't have to set it equal to 0 because that does not give me a restriction. I do have to set the 5x plus 2 equal to 0. So 5x plus 2 equals 0. 5x equals negative 2. X equals negative 2 over 5 is a domain restriction, which means that there is a hole in the graph there. So x cannot equal negative 2/5. The last question we'll be doing, we have our denominators x minus 1 and x plus 5. Again, because there's no greatest common factor, then my least common denominator is actually just putting these two next to each other. What is my first fraction missing? It's missing an x plus 5. So I'm going to multiply the whole fraction times x plus 5 over x plus 5. My second fraction is missing the x minus 1. And multiply by the x minus 1 over x minus 1. Now again, very important here, that minus sign here that I almost wrote over, go ahead and make sure that this is a -2, and we're going to change this to a positive sign. The next step is to distribute on my numerator. Okay, go ahead and multiply. You get 7x plus 35 minus 2x plus 2. Combine like terms and put them in order. So 7x minus 2x is 5x. 35 plus 2 is 37. Is my numerator factorable? The answer is no. So that is my final answer, but I do have to go back and look for my wholes. Okay? Take your denominators and set them equal to 0. X minus 1 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. Okay? Add 1 to both sides. X cannot be equal to 1. The second one, subtract 5 from both sides. X cannot be equal to -5. Because remember, if I go plug in a 1 right here, I get a 1 minus 1. I cannot have division by 0. Okay. Hopefully this video helped practice adding and subtracting rational expressions. If you liked it or find it beneficial, then subscribe to the channel while I will be posting more videos. Thanks and have a great day.